Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our conversation here this afternoon. We appreciate you taking some time to be with us. I'm Steve Sanduski, and I want to bring on our two guests today. We have Catharine Aguilar and Lisa Salvi. And let me just introduce both of them. Let me introduce Catharine first. So Catharine is the Chief Marketing Officer of CornerCap Wealth Advisors, which has its main office in Atlanta, Georgia. And they also have a second office in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Catharine has joined the industry just in the past year and a half. And she came to financial services after spending about 20 years in the healthcare industry doing healthcare marketing. So what I really like about that is she has the ability to take ideas that are working in other industries and apply them to our business. And so I think you're going to find some interesting insights from Catharine. So Catharine, I appreciate you being with us here today.
Great.
And also we have Lisa Salvi. Lisa has been on the show before, and Lisa is the VP of Advisor Services for Charles Schwab. She's got a big job. So she oversees the business consulting group. She oversees the production of their multiple benchmarking studies, which are for the most part, and they are the industry standard. So, and now with the acquisition of TD Ameritrade, your job has probably doubled as well. So Lisa, welcome back. It's great to see you again as well.
Thanks so much for having me again.
All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and jump into it here. So Lisa, why don't we start with you? Just briefly tell us what the benchmarking study is. And actually, before you do that, so what the focus here today is, we want to talk about how do you get to $1 billion or more in assets under management. And one of the studies that Lisa's going to mention here is that Schwab did a specific cut of their study to show folks that were at that level or higher. So we're going to talk about how do you get there. And then there's a new index that you've created as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the study?
Great. So our benchmarking study, we field it every year, usually between January and March. This year, we extended that till April because of what was happening in the world in March. And we're just incredibly grateful that despite the huge challenges we were all having in March with volatility and adjusting from working from home, we had still over 1,000 firms who participated in our study. So our study represents over $1 trillion in assets under management, over 1,000 advisory firms. About 75% of firms completed this after March 1st. So a lot of the results we'll talk about today actually include the backdrop of the pandemic and a lot of the change we were going through at the time. And one of my favorite things is things like this, where we get to sit down, talk to advisors, talk to people like you in the industry, and share a specific cut of data. So this one in particular is the first time we're talking about the billion plus firms for 2020 and some of the trends we're observing there. And if you want, I can talk a little bit about one of our new features as well, Steve, our top performing firms index that we just introduced this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and put that up on the screen. Yeah, so I think this is some really interesting information.
So this is something I'm very excited about. I would say the top question we always get when it comes to benchmarking is, wow, this is a lot of great data, but how do some firms outperform? What do they do to outperform? And so we wanted to take a very sophisticated look into how firms are outperforming. And so we embarked on a project with our data science team at Schwab. We tested this and refined this over an 18-month period. And what we came to was isolating the 15 metrics from the benchmarking study that have the biggest predictor of firms who outperform. So you can see these on this screen right here. On the left, you see a lot of the firm performance metrics, and on the right are some of the activities that firms actually take that lead to this top performance. What's really interesting about this is that a firm of any size could be a top performing firm. So a top performing firm ranks in the top 20%. They have great growth rates, which I know we always focus on, but they're really running their firm really exceptionally well and doing a lot of things that lead to building an enduring business and having a high firm valuation over time. And I think as we talk today and I call out top performing firms, you'll see some of that come to life and how powerful these behaviors can be as you run a business.
Well, Lisa, we had a number of questions that came in as people were registering. Some of you actually asked some questions in there, and we had several people that were asking about the Firm Performance Index. So we've got 15 there. If you had to narrow it down, if some said, look, I want to pick 2 or 3 or 4 that I really want to focus on, what would you say for an advisory firm? What are some of a smaller set that might be some ideal to look at? And Catherine, I'll ask you the same question.
Sure. So I would say, I would probably point people to focus on the ones you see on the right side of the screen here, because those are actual activities you can take. So if you're leading your firm and you want to start to see the results you see on the left, lots of growth, high revenue, low staff attrition, low client attrition, really strong operating margin, all those things that firms generally always want, you can do some of the things on the right, and over time that's going to lead to better results. And of course, I'm really passionate about those things as well, because those are the things we focus on helping advisors do as they build their business for the future and really try to reach their vision for their firm.
Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, so these are all important metrics, and you'll hear me talk a lot today about getting very granular on your book of business, because I'm a big believer in not letting the tail wag the dog, letting the tactics or the metrics be what's driving your business. So absolutely agree with Lisa. These are all key performance indicators and things that firms should be tracking. But what I'll try to share today is a view of how we've gone much deeper and really dissected further and looking at the story that the numbers may not be telling you, going a little bit below the top line numbers. So it really depends on where you are in your life cycle and where you are strategically, I think, as well. So that's what I'll try to bring to life a little bit today.
The one thing that I would add is, I would say if you're going to measure three things on top of what's already been talked about, is one is some measure of the top line growth. So it could be the revenue growth, it could be the number of new clients, because you want to understand, that's kind of the lifeblood of the business, is bringing new people in. So I'd have one metric that measures the growth, and then a second measure would be around, say, the customer service. It could be retention. It could be, some type of, customer satisfaction number of some type, but something about how happy are the clients that we're working with. And then third would be some measure on profitability. So I think the combination of those three, growth, retention / service, and then profitability would be three key metrics to monitor as well. All right, well, let's do our first poll. And since we are talking about the metrics here, we're going to go ahead and pop up the poll for everybody. And what we want to find out here is about the metrics. So the question is, which of the following metrics does your firm track on a regular basis? Now you can check all of those that apply, so you can check more than one, and we'll see what we have here. So we've got the numbers are rolling in. We can see them on our screen. I know those of you watching this aren't able to see. And good, getting lots of participation here. So it's always fun to do these polls because we get some real-time information, and it helps us direct where we want to go with the conversation, because then we can point out some things that maybe surprised us, or maybe they didn't surprise us, and we can give some additional information. So, all right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds here. And we'll give it 5 more. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and end the poll then. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read through the numbers, because I'm not sure that those of you watching will be able to see this. So looking at the numbers here, the first one was, okay, these are the metrics that you're monitoring. So the first one was the number of new clients. 82% of you said you track that. Net organic growth of assets, 51% are tracking that. Just revenue growth itself is 83%. Client attrition is 40%. Operating profit margin is 46%. And my personal income is 39%. So Catherine, let me ask you, as you look at these numbers, did any of these results surprise you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting that number of new clients and revenue growth are so front and center. And again, great to track that. You obviously want to know top line what's happening in your business. But I would say that the story actually lies beneath that. With the number of new clients coming in, we need to do some more qualitative work, not just measuring the quantitative number, because who are those clients? If you're only attracting clients who are already retired and withdrawing assets, or who are older, then you have a leaky bucket. So really, you're always going to be trying to get the bucket filled back up. Looking at personal income actually is interesting too, because I'm surprised when it comes to succession planning. I think that a lot of folks get into this business because they're entrepreneurial. So I'm a little bit surprised. Maybe people just aren't being honest, but looking at your income over time and how that factors into succession planning as we think about strategic viewpoints, looking over time and how founders are transitioning their business to the next generation. I'm a little bit surprised to see personal income so low, and we can talk about what that means maybe in terms of generating sales and catalyzing growth.
Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, these are all important. And I think to some of the earlier points, you don't need to track 15 separate metrics constantly within your business. You should find a few that really mean the most and hopefully link to your strategic plan, and really pay attention to those and keep them alive within your firm. The one I always recommend firms make sure they do understand is their net organic growth rate though. So that's your growth rate stripping out investment performance. That's more controllable, and that gives you some really good insight into how well your client experience is resonating, and the decisions you're making as you run your firm, how well that's resonating out there. So just make sure that you don't only track growth or revenue growth with investment performance mixed in. I think it's really important to understand the other side of it, which is your organic growth rate, your net organic growth rate.
Yeah, and I would just add, as I look at that, the operating profit margin, 46% of you were tracking that. So I hope you're tracking some type of profit margin, whether it's operating profit or some type of profit margin, because as you go from, if you're say at 50 million now or 100 million now or 200 million now, and you want to go to $1 billion or more, you're really becoming a business. And so you've really got to focus on what is the profit margin. And because it's the profit margin that's going to enable you to reinvest in the business and continue to grow. So I think it's important that you track some profit margin because that's where the money's going to come to reinvest in the business. Okay, let's go ahead and stop sharing the poll here, and let's dig into some of the additional data that is in the presentation here. So I think we've got another slide here that we want to put up that talks about hiring in terms of what the firms that are doing $1 billion or more in AUM, what's their hiring plan. So Lisa, why don't you walk us through this slide here?
Yeah, this is one I was just super fascinated to see how people would answer it this year. So for all firms, normally it's about 75% of firms are planning to hire in any given 12-month period. But remember, people took this study after the pandemic had really started to take hold. So I wasn't sure if we would still see quite as much hiring plans in the works. For billion-plus firms, it was stronger than ever, 83% of firms planning to hire. Talked to quite a few advisors who have actually done that and brought people on completely remotely in this environment. The interesting one that we track that you see on the right is where are you finding these people? And for billion-plus firms, almost half are finding them at other RIAs. So you can kind of tell who you're talking to. If they're on the recipient side of that, they're getting some really fantastic talent. And there's other firms that are losing some of that talent. And there's just important things to pay attention to, your overall compensation structure. Are you giving people the opportunity to participate in equity ownership? That's been a very big topic of consideration lately. What's your employee value proposition, and how well are you investing in your team members to make them want to stay and grow with your firm? Those are some of the things we would see and we would hope people would look at.
Catherine?
Yeah, so what strikes me about this slide is that everyone is still going back to the same well. And obviously I'm biased because I came from a completely different industry. But our firm, I think as we've grown over time, maybe it's been the confidence of our growth that's enabled us to do this as we've gotten bigger. But we've been really strategic about hiring from outside the industry. Of course, we do have CFPs, trained advisors, the CFA group. In our practice, that's the core, the backbone for day-to-day work. But our chief compliance officer is one of the most brilliant business people I've ever known. Talk about owning the P&L and wanting to understand the business decisions. He went to Yale Divinity School, and he studies medieval chant as a pastime. We also have one of our most extraordinary client service advisors, an advisor who joined us. He happened to have been the mayor in his small town in North Carolina, and he knew this client service manager. She was working in government in this small town, but she was amazing at customer service. So did she have to be trained on the business? Of course, just like I've learned it. But that's the easy part. When you find great talent, our mantra is always be recruiting. And if you find someone who's exceptional, especially today in this environment where people are displaced, grab that talent. Maybe there is a short-term margin impact, but get comfortable with that. That's why it's important to be measuring things like margin, as Steve noted. But it's tough to find great people. And when you find one, be willing to take that risk, because that has been something our founder did over the years, took risks on hiring people outside of the industry. And man, has it paid off big. That's something I saw work really well in pharma too. teachers tend to be really great pharmaceutical reps. So, don't be afraid to look outside the industry and be a little creative with your hiring, especially in this environment when some really great people are looking for new opportunities right now.
Yeah, just a couple to what you just said there, Catherine, is this diversity. So hiring people outside of the industry, looking for people that have different experiences, that think differently than you do. And so I know often culture, and we should be hiring people that further our culture. And so we want these people that think, act, look different than we do, because it's that mix of people that bring out the ability to come up with new ideas, to come up with some innovative leaps, and to come up with things that you're not going to think of yourself. So I think that's a key. And then a second thing is that 83% of these firms are hiring. I mean, if you want to grow, you're going to need more people. And that also gets back to having the profit margin. So you've got to have the profit margin to reinvest in the business, to hire the people that's going to help the business grow. So, okay, good there. All right, let's take a look at the next one here, which is looking at acquiring new clients. So Lisa, why don't you set the stage for this one?
This is another one I was really interested to see how firms would answer the question, given the backdrop of working from home and some of those complexities we were all dealing with, figuring out how to do, client meetings via interfaces like this one. But what we saw, and I kind of say no news is news in this case because of all the change we were dealing with, firms are remarkably consistent in really focusing on acquiring new clients, and just that appetite for growth is as much there as it ever has been. The third top strategic priority for the year was improve productivity with new technology. And that's another one that just became even more important in this environment. I think every single firm I talked to had to try new things, had to figure out how to connect with clients or add value to client relationship, use more digital platforms to accomplish core tasks. And we've really seen a huge uptick in digital adoption, and people are very happy with those processes. They're more secure. They work really well. It takes a lot of work. And I think Catherine probably has some stories she could tell about helping the end client understand how to do those for the first time. But then once they understand it, generally it's really well received and well liked, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all comes down to the client. I mean, everything we do, we focus on the client experience. So adopting new technologies, it's not about what we think would make our life more convenient as a firm. It has to be about what that ideal client, and I know Lisa's going to talk a little bit more about that. We believe strongly in doing what the client needs, what's going to make their life easier. And when you have a multi-generational practice, that can certainly be tricky. But one thing that I thought was interesting about this is client referrals, this data that Lisa just shared. Because client referrals, everyone wants to know, how can you get more client referrals, business referrals? Do you need a formal structure in place? And this is another example of where getting creative and hiring people outside the industry might be able to help. Non-traditional centers of influence are something we talk about a lot in our firm, and we're not going back to the same well. How we got to $1 billion and how many of us operate is to try to go to the CPAs, the local estate planning folks, the typical usual suspects that have generated business over the years. And that's been a great pathway for us, but it's a well-worn pathway and it's highly competitive. So we really think about blue ocean opportunities. Where can we go that no one else is thinking to go right now? So I would encourage you to do that as you think about business referrals. Don't just go to the same folks all the time. Think about, for example, if you're targeting females, we're not just going to divorce attorneys. We're looking at a trend that's emerging really quickly now. There are divorce coaches. There are even divorce doulas now. It's a whole emerging sector, and looking at different centers of influence where you can partner and try to get a pathway that's not quite as trodden as some of the others in your local area. So we're big believers in thinking non-traditionally about centers of influence and how you go about client referrals and cultivating that business.
Good. All right. Let's take a look at the next one here. I know on this next one here, we've got a couple of detailed pieces that we want to talk about here. Lisa, again, I'll let you set the stage on this one.
Yeah, so Steve, I think this is the third time you've invited me on your show, and the third time I'm going to talk about this, and probably if you have me 10 more times, I would talk about it 10 more times because I just believe in it so strongly. But one of my favorite findings from benchmarking is that firms that have a documented ideal client persona and client value proposition get 28% more new clients and 45% more new client assets. And the reason why I love this so much is because this is something you can actually take action on. We have programs that help firms, and anyone who customizes with Schwab, I would like to help you create your ideal client persona and your client value proposition, because it is such a differentiator. This is not unique to RIAs. All great businesses do this, but the more you can narrow your focus, that you can understand exactly who you're building your business for as you grow, the better result you're going to have. Trying to just, appeal to everyone doesn't generally work. And we have firms that have done such a great job with this. They have named their ideal clients. I'm going to give the example of the Johnsons, a married couple with 2 daughters in private school. They'll have 1 year of overlap in college at the same time. Their parents are both in Silicon Valley in the tech industry. I mean, they have a chocolate lab, like I know the name of their dog. They have really boiled down in such vivid detail who their ideal client is that you feel like you actually know them. And the way that's come to life in their business is they gave everyone a picture of their ideal client. So every single person on their desk has a picture of the ideal client. They make business decisions like as far as what would the Johnsons want. So the leaders down to everyone in the firm thinks through that lens. So when they're thinking, how are we going to help people in this environment? They first ask themselves, what would the Johnsons want? What kind of tech would they want? How would they like us to communicate with them? What kind of content should I put out there that's going to really help them through this time period? And one specific example was evaluating real estate in the Bay Area, which is really complicated. And a lot of people want to have a second home in the Tahoe area. And so non-traditional business referral is real estate expertise with those 2 factors in mind. And not only does that help their ideal client, which is a large proportion of their client base, they're getting so many referrals from people, them inviting other people into that conversation. This one firm said, I had 12 prospect meetings last week alone, and they were writing us because of the great work and that the fact that they're getting these incredibly well-qualified leads with a subject line that says, I have another Johnson client for you. So when you really articulate it, not only do you understand it and you build your business that way, your team members build their business that way. They understand those factors, and the other people in your referral network can also send you the exact right type of client that you're going to just absolutely wow with what you're going to deliver. So this is incredibly powerful stuff. These results are really enviable, and I would encourage any firm, as you grow, take the time to do this, because it's a huge opportunity to set yourself up for long-term success.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Lisa, because I can't say enough great things about this. It's such a critical tenet of marketing in general. And as she said, it's a free opportunity that your custodian likely offers to you. We worked with Schwab to go through this exercise last year, and it was hugely helpful. But I will add, make sure you're being authentic. I think I've seen firms get trapped in the idea of going after a target that seems really lucrative and attractive. So for example, tech entrepreneurs, if we could go after them, they have a lot of money, but that is not authentic to us. We're much more millionaire next door, very humble roots, salt of the earth type folks. Our roots are in North Carolina tobacco farming and RJR Nabisco and the tobacco industry. 30 years ago, that's where we started with one of our rainmakers. So going after tech entrepreneurs just wouldn't be authentic to us. And so I've seen firms get trapped in that idea of, because something feels lucrative and like a good opportunity, don't be beguiled into thinking that it's the right one for you. Make sure that you have a personal connection that's going to make it so much easier and so much more genuine and fun, quite frankly, and ultimately productive to go after a target that means something to you specifically. So I think that's a really important decision to make as you go after your ICP. But the one thing we found, and I'll fully admit, our firm was founded as a generalist firm, and we help a lot of people. We have a really wide variety, even within that millionaire next door type description. So we got to $1 billion that way, and that's great. But our growth has plateaued there. So now that we are 1.2, 1.3 billion inching forward, we are having to focus on not just an ICP, but we're getting more granular. I'm a big believer in a hyper target. So think about women, for example. Everyone wants to go after female head of household now. Divorced women, it's such a hot, popular topic now that, or target rather, now that so much wealth is concentrating in females in the US. Well, you have to make sure you're going after a very specific female. Just saying you want to go after divorced women may not be enough. So we had an idea that was born out of a genuine client situation, for example, where it was a divorce situation, but seen all too often where the father and the mother are using the children as pawns in a financial battle. So there was a very specific need for intervention with financial empowerment and education. Well, we created a concierge solution for that particular client, but then we've used that as a very specific hyper target. So instead of just saying, if you know someone going through a divorce, refer them to me, tell the story of that very specific situation, share some high level details that are local to your community. That becomes a much more, even more referable and specific hyper target, we like to think of it. That goes way beyond even just the ICP, but can't say enough about how important it is, as Lisa already described, to have this ICP in place.
What you're looking at here is over a 5-year trend, firms who are offering more services. And as you can see, firms are offering more services. We don't have a slide on this, but fees are remaining the same. And so that can often manifest as feeling like margin compression a little bit. But what I really like about the way Steve put these 2 slides together, first ideal client and then services offered, that's what we should be doing, right? Think about what your ideal client really wants. I love your example, Catherine, about hyper targeting and making sure that it makes really specific sense, and then offering that service because it's going to resonate so much with your ideal client. I think firms often will see these results and go, oh my gosh, does this mean I have to now start offering all of these things? And my answer would be no. My answer would be, think about who you're building your business for. Think about how to make your business irresistible to that client. Tell a really compelling story around that. Deliver it incredibly well, and that is going to lead to growth and referrals. And maybe, Catherine, I'll just ask you what comes to mind for you for this.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, the biggest challenge in addressing this is that we have a very multi-generational practice, a very big book of business that spans literally from 20 up to 90 plus. I think our oldest client is well into their 90s. So that's a challenge as you grow over time and you have clients who stay with you for a really long time, hopefully. The generational churn makes it challenging to figure out how do you introduce services that make sense for your entire book of business. So that's why we're such believers in segmentation. The ICP is critical, but really segmenting your book of business is so important. You might have, let's say you have 3 or 4 clients in a given quarter that say, bill pay would be such a great benefit for me. Okay, great, but don't just run with that clue. Really take a hard look, segment your book of business, look at the numbers, quantify and determine how many potential clients or current clients would actually benefit from that. Or do you have folks who are all retired and they're happily paying their bills on their own? That's just one example, but that's the way we look at our book of business before introducing a service. Again, walk in the shoes of the ICP. What is it that he or she needs to make his or her life easier? And how can you deliver on that? An example of how we've addressed that is by rolling out an accumulator product line, which sounds like a big, scary endeavor, but it wasn't. It was actually pretty turnkey to accomplish. So we have our traditional high net worth business and merging into ultra high net worth, obviously a very different type of client. But we found that intergenerational wealth transfer was a tremendous emerging need. So we developed, in partnership with the Schwab institutional investment platform, was a very turnkey resource that made it easy for us to put our research and our investment approach onto this platform and market it as a completely separate product line that we call My Accumulation Plan. So it's a subset of our CornerCap Wealth Advisors business, but the way we communicate with Generation Z and millennials is completely different than the way we are engaging with our boomers and Gen X clients, as you can imagine. So look for solutions that are emerging within the segmented book of business and cater to those. Very much as Lisa said, I'm not a big advocate of introducing shiny new ideas just because it seems like it's an important trend. Make sure it matches your book of business and where you're trying to go strategically.
Okay, let's take a look at the next one here. And I think we've got a few metrics that will help us in terms of the looking at the service levels here. And a lot of data on this slide. Again, Lisa, I'll turn it over to you to review that for us.
All right, so what we're looking at here is over a 5-year period, those first 2, AUM and clients per professional. What you see is your average professional within a firm is working with more AUM and more client relationships. But as you move into that yellow color, the annual hours per client service are staying about the same over a 5-year period, which we think is a really positive thing. So we're serving more AUM, we're working with more clients, but we're still providing a very high touch client experience. And this yellow color kind of aggregates all the different roles that contribute to that client service aspect. The powerful thing is what you see at the bottom, which is over a 5-year period, firms have gone from spending 19 hours on ops and administration down to 17 hours. That's really powerful. That shows the tech stack and the integration and the APIs and the custodial relationship are all helping you to gain some of that efficiency back and some of that scale back. And what I want to kind of call your attention to over there on the right-hand corner, that same cohort, those top performing firms that are growing so much and getting such great results, they are only spending 13 hours per client relationship. And when we dig into that, they're doing a lot of things really well, I think, that have positioned them extremely well for the kind of environment we're in today. They adopt all sorts of digital touch points across the board, whether it's eAuth and eSig or DocuSign, texting with their clients, using a virtual meeting mechanism even before this whole environment started, centralizing functions. And I think a lot of the firms who are joining us today that are thinking about growing to $1 billion, you have the opportunity to really think through your workflows, centralize those functions. We've been doing a lot of consulting on client journey mapping, meaning thinking through exactly how you want those touch points to be with your clients and who within the firm is going to perform certain roles. And what generally happens is firms push some of those activities that take a lot of time down to their lower level staff members to help develop them. And then they save some of their capacity of their more expensive senior relationship managers so that they're building the relationship or generating new business. And it's really powerful. And in this environment where we've all had to adjust to, totally doing things differently, because we still have a lot of people working from home in most cases, this is something we're getting called on a lot to do more of, to help firms think this through and kind of move out of this phase we've been where it was really reactive and into a more proactive and planful future state.
Yeah, we've been going through these workflow and process management exercises to continue optimizing. But what I'll say is I keep harping on the ICP, and I promise Lisa didn't encourage me to say this. I'm just such a believer in it, because the closer you are, the more closely you're aligned with your ICP, the more productive you're going to be. If you're a generalist and you're having to custom create a brand new plan every time you get a new prospect coming in the door, then you're reinventing the wheel over and over and over. Whereas if you're serving one type of client really well, if it's an architect, a dentist, you know the ins and outs of their practice, you know everything that matters to them, what the issues are they're dealing with, you're so much more productive inherently. So everything Lisa said is critically important operationally. But at the end of the day, this is a relationship, trust, people business. And so being in front of the client and making sure that you are making the highest possible impact in front of the client is critical. So that ICP matters so much. From a productivity standpoint, though, I will give a quick plug to a group that's been really helpful to me as I've learned in the industry, but one of our advisors turned me on to them. It's a podcast called The Perfect RIA, and they have phenomenal productivity hacks. They have been so critical and served up ideas. Whether you're 100 million or 2 billion, these ideas are just as applicable, and it's a free resource. And in terms of productivity, it's just a great thing that I listen to when I'm out running or walking with my new baby. It's just a really nice way to get ideas about how to make your practice more productive. They are masters at it, and so they're really good at suggesting productivity opportunities. So I would encourage you to listen to that. It's called The Perfect RIA. So a request was to repeat that. It's The Perfect RIA. I think their last names are Shalansky and Jarvis, if I remember correctly. So happy to share that afterwards, if helpful.
This is one that I love. So when we do our benchmarking study, we first and foremost want to give all those participating firms a lot of insight into how their business is doing. They get a 45-page peer report with all of these metrics we're talking about, comparing them to one of 12 firms. We use this to inform a lot of our thought leadership and the pieces we build, but it also, in the consulting side of my role, we want to make sure that we're able to help firms with the things that are most important to them. So these have stayed fairly similar year over year, but we love the fact that over 1,000 firms that we work with are telling us exactly where they want outside help. Marketing strategy, hugely important. Many firms are really looking at this in depth in terms of their website in particular, which is very, very important today. That's your new front door to your business, right? And I'll kind of save some of this for Catharine since she's actually a chief marketing officer. And I think she has some real world stories she can tell, but that marketing strategy is really important. And firms are really spending a lot of time thinking through, you know, how do I develop content that's going to resonate? We've seen a lot of really interesting things firms are doing with video in a fairly low cost way in terms of just, one story I love is firms are taking video of what their office looks like because people can't come to their beautiful office anymore. And so posting it on their website and helping people understand, we know you can't come to our office right now, but we want to showcase you what you could expect when you do. That's one thing firms are doing that is helping with that sales cycle. Even hyper targeting, like Catharine's saying, if you're noticing your ideal clients are dealing with an issue, like one firm we work with, their ideal clients are Fortune 500 executives, and they're generally about 10 to 20 years away from retirement. And they were noticing that a lot of their clients were getting offered early retirement packages. I think this is just something that's happening right now. And so they were getting a lot of calls about, can I retire early? So they did some really targeted digital advertising so that when someone in their area Googles that question, their firm comes up first. And then they took that a little further and they did a webcast on it and they posted a video, and they got very, very, you know, these are not massive changes. This is something they're answering and thinking about for their clients anyway, but they're allowing that to be shared more broadly and generating a lot of growth and interest and conversation through those tactics. So growth strategy, marketing strategy, sales. So you can see firms are pretty focused on growth here. But tech strategy, things like cybersecurity never drop off the list. These are always important. And these are things that we're really passionate about helping advisors with.
Well, you know, it's funny because what I've observed about the RIA space is it attracts very entrepreneurial people who are hardworking and want to do everything themselves. And so as I've listened at the great marketing guidance that comes through so many sources, often advisors are encouraged, go do this, go do that, learn Google AdWords, go figure out your search strategy to do your own optimization. And absolutely you can do that. But any effort you're expending in those areas where you're having to learn a skill that's not natural to you is going to take time away from what's most critical. Again, this is still a relationship, people, trust business. You have to be in front of the client first and foremost, delivering value to those clients. So I would say be very honest with yourself. What are you good at? What's going to be easy for you to learn? And what does it make more sense for you to outsource? How valuable is your time? So I've been in marketing in the healthcare space for 20 years. I know marketing, but I'm a strategist. I am not an expert at social media strategy. I'm not an expert at digital marketing. So I give the strategic direction to partners who can very cost effectively execute that. So make sure you're honest with yourself about where's the best use of your time, and don't be afraid to outsource, especially right now, because once again, so much extraordinary talent has been displaced. You can get some really great marketing talent for not that much. Again, you have to take the time to develop your strategy and make sure you deliver good guidance. But once you do that, you can hire people. And I'm happy to, you know, if you have a specific marketing challenge, you're not sure where to go. The benefit of having worked in marketing for so long is I have lots of connections. I can say, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Based on the specific need. But it's very cost effective to outsource specific things. And going back to the authenticity point, another trap I've seen people fall into, including our own firm, is don't try to force yourself into a tactic just because it's working for someone else. Does social media even make sense? So we were pursuing some social media tactics before I got to the firm that were not really a good use of time, and they weren't generating any return for us. So we stopped doing some things and added others. So for example, Twitter was doing nothing for us. Pinterest, though, has been phenomenally successful for our accumulator target. So thinking about a new young female head of household, new mom, for example, she's on Pinterest. And those are influential women who have money to invest. So we pivoted to where we knew it was more authentic for our target and for ourselves because we knew how to communicate. So again, authenticity, do what you love, know whether you're better at blogging or podcasting, and don't force yourself to do something just because everyone else is podcasting. If it's not natural for you, and you don't feel comfortable doing it, or social media is going to be a huge burden for you to have to carry forward, don't force yourself to do it. Make sure it's the right tactic for you to pursue.
We always joke because we get that question all the time, Catharine, like, should I be on social media? And our consultants will always say, well, it depends, which is such a classic consulting kind of answer, but it really does depend, because if that's not where your ideal clients are, and that's not where they want to interact with you, and that's not how they're going to consume information, and that's not going to help you at all, you know, don't get distracted with a tactic like that. Maybe you are on there and you listen a little bit, but that shouldn't be where you're spending all your time. So I think, as with everything else, it kind of depends. And I know we have some firms that are, you know, really trying to grow to be 100 million or trying to grow to be $1 billion. And that's the other thing I would say is, don't feel like you have to do everything, right? Like, doing one or two things really well all the way to implementation and beyond, and keeping it alive within your firm, it's going to get you so much further ahead than feeling like you have to do every single thing. The only one you just like have to do on this list is cybersecurity. And that's just the reality of modern, doing business in the modern world. It's here to stay.
I do want to get to this next one here, which is about strategic planning and having a written succession plan. So Lisa, again, walk us through this. This is obviously pretty critical too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve, you and I both believe in the strategic planning process so much.
Yes.
We could probably do an entire podcast just on this one topic alone. This is a huge differentiator. So those top performing firms, 75% of those firms have a written strategic plan, and those are firms of all sizes that make up that number. When I say a strategic plan, most firms are like, yeah, I have one. Please make sure it's in writing. Please make sure it includes purpose, values, vision, that you have long-term and short-term goals. And the most successful firms, I'd say, limit the number of things on their strategic plan. Like, maybe you have 3 to 5 goals in a given year, but every single one of those goals should have an owner within your firm who is going to take accountability for driving that forward. Oftentimes you link your incentive compensation towards performance on that, either on an individual or team-based or firm-based basis. You should be talking about your strategic plan within your firm on a regular basis. And for firms that are really growing, I've seen some really remarkable things lately with including on your path to partnership, someone who's not yet an equity owner, but could be in the future. They're assigning them one of the annual goals within the strategic plan with a mentor who's a current partner. And that person is really gaining leadership ability by owning that, bringing it forward, communicating within the firm, taking responsibility for it. And I think that's just such a beautifully powerful thing to think about as you're growing your firm. Can you involve your next generation of leader in your strategic planning process, in those things that are so critical for your long-term success? Because not only will they take it very seriously and help lead those efforts internally, but you're also just developing outstanding leadership talent that can take on more and more responsibility into the future.
Yeah. All such
Catherine,
great,
anything to add there?
it's all such great ideas. It's hard to build on that. Although I will say it can be intimidating. What I observed when I came to our firm is that it was the typical, what Lisa said, the strategic plan was there, but often in the founder and CEO's head and not as regimented. Definitely the elements were there, but so it was a great opportunity for us to go through a more formal planning process. But I understand that can be overwhelming and intimidating and sometimes just too time intensive. So I would say, don't bite off more than you can chew or try to boil the ocean. Just start somewhere. And I think that most things in life, business or personal, can often be solved by a 2x2 matrix. Just take a basic 2x2 matrix. If you're a small shop, you don't have a lot of bandwidth, just start somewhere and brain dump, take a couple of hours to brain dump all the things you've been thinking about that are swirling around in your head, and then plot out longitudinally, look at x-axis, y-axis, what's going to give you the most impact over time versus the effort you're going to have to put into it. So if that's financial resources, your time, things you'll have to learn, and just really have an honest assessment, plot things out, and you'll be able to see pretty quickly a visual representation of what quadrant makes the most sense, where you can get the biggest bang for your buck. It's just a simple place to start. And my firm is fortunate because I'm a classically trained marketer. I came to the firm with a bag of tricks from corporate America, which is really nice. But you don't have to have that. There are some great books, and I'm sure any of us could suggest ones, but there's an oldie but goodie I love called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's probably 15, 20 years old now, but in the early 2000s, it was really popular. And I came to love that approach in the pharmaceutical industry, but the tools and exercises are just as relevant there, especially harping again on this ICP and finding the space, the blue ocean, where you can actually compete that isn't completely, full of churn and bloody water from the competition in your area, whatever that might be. So don't get overwhelmed, just start somewhere. And then again, as Lisa said, make the goals very specific. So we follow the SMART acronym. You've probably heard that: SMART, measurable, accountable, realistic, and time bound. Put some metrics behind it and ensure that you're actually following through with baby steps to get there. Again, don't take on everything on at once, but start somewhere, and you'll be amazed at how much progress you can make in such a short period of time by putting some action steps in place and assigning them as Lisa suggested.
And Steve, the one other thing I'll maybe mention here is we like to take firms through a process to build a one-page strategic plan. But, you know, I've just been sitting here thinking, I was recently with a group of about 20 advisors of firms of all sizes. Some had multiple locations. The number one thing right now on their mind was just firm culture and how to keep their firm culture healthy and thriving, even though we're in this prolonged state of a work from home or semi work from home environment. And there's so much power in going back to your purpose, values, and vision, right? Those things that most of us have for our business, but there's a lot of power in going back to those things, telling some stories with your team and sometimes your clients who illustrate what your values are and what you stand for, even in times like this. And for firms that are really thinking about long-term culture, maybe that's one of the things on your plan. It was so across the board how important that is. Firms are worried about going into the winter months. You know, there's been a lot of adrenaline that's gotten us through 2020 to this point. And it's going to be a little bit while longer that we're in this state. And so this is an area where we are already, and we'll be doing a ton of work with firms in Q4 and Q1, because it's really powerful to feel like you're getting out of that reactive zone and you're getting into that proactive planning, and you're starting to identify and isolate just a few key things that you really want to focus on and do really well in the coming months.
Yeah, well, I think we'll go ahead and put up the second poll here. And while we've got that going, we do have a question here from Andrew. And Andrew said, are the fastest growing firms unique in the tactics and strategy they implement, or are they better at execution? I would just say that, yeah, you need to have a strategy. You need to have a plan for sure, but you need to execute, because the best strategy in the world without executing is worthless. And so if you're going to, you know, do it. Okay. So, you know, people say execution, it's the other 99%. So it's all about execution. It's about accountability. So when you put this plan together, you need to have a system of meetings where you're getting together. You have a big annual planning meeting. You have a quarterly update meeting. You have monthly meetings. You have weekly meetings. So you've got this cadence of meetings throughout the year where you're reviewing the plan, you're reviewing the metrics that you've set in place, and you're holding people accountable. So yes, it's absolutely about execution. Okay, so we've got the poll going up here. Which best describes your strategic planning process? And we'll leave this up here for maybe another 10 seconds or so. And as we're having our conversation here today in October, this is the time to be doing your strategic planning and getting everything in place, and so that you can really hit the ground running come January 1st. Okay, we'll give it just another, okay, yeah, so let's go ahead and share the results. So what we've got here is, so the question is, which best describes your strategic planning process? So 46% of you said it's a formal structured process with annual quarterly meetings and high accountability. 47% said it's an informal process. I have an idea of what I want to accomplish. You know, it's kind of like in my head, and I have some accountability. And then 5% of you said it's mostly reactive. We meet if there's a big decision. So Catherine, how about you? Any reaction to what you see there?
Yeah, I think, and I'm trying to remember the results. We're not actually seeing them displayed. So, but I think this goes back to productivity. There we go. Okay. Having that structured plan in place really will make you more productive. I know it can feel like a drain on your time up front, but that accountability has been critical for us. So as we've shifted this year, succession planning has been a big factor in how we've operated differently. We've named a new CEO and a new leadership team. We're a little bit bigger than perhaps some of the folks on the phone today. We have 20 full-time employees and some contract team members, but we have a core group of leaders, including myself, that meet once a week. We hold ourselves accountable, and every single week we get together and say, what are the most critical issues? Is it a culture issue, as Lisa said? Is it a long-term planning issue? What are the things that we're struggling with? What are we hearing from clients? And we hold ourselves accountable to assigning out action items among ourselves as a leadership team. And then we go out and execute on that over the course of the following week and come back and reconvene. So even that structure has been a huge improvement for us in terms of accountability and those smart goals, making sure that we actually do follow through on them. This year, annual planning is a little bit challenging, but we're finding ways to do that virtually, or we have an outdoor space we've been using and just safely gathering to protect everyone. But we are finding ways to continue that planning process because we believe very much in having the formal structured succession plan and long-term growth plan in place.
Lisa, anything else to add? I know we're bumping up here at the top of the hour.
I completely agree. And it's such a differentiator. I would say, take it seriously. Nobody had, global pandemic and social unrest and, volatility and all of the things that we've seen happen in 2020. I don't think anyone had that in their SWOT going into the year. So it's a great opportunity. And I think, as you grow and you're developing that next generation of leader and talent within your firm, give those folks a chance to participate and a chance to maybe speak and lead a little bit, because that really does help you develop that talent that's going to help propel you to the next levels of success as well.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and put the final slide up. And then while I'm just briefly going through that, I'm going to ask Lisa and Catherine, after I finish reviewing this, just to have one final comment. And so if you want a replay of the webinar, if you want to get links to the resources that we talked about here today, including the 2020 Schwab RIA Benchmarking Study, as well as the compensation study from 2019, you can go to stevesanduski.com/billion or more. And that's Steve Sanduski with an I, and then billion or more is all one word. So we've got lots of great resources there. The replay will be up there as well shortly, if not by the time you're already watching this. Okay, so Catherine, let's one final quick comment from you.
Yeah, I would just like to share a cautionary tale from the pharma industry. I was working for a small pharma company here in the Atlanta area many years ago when I first started my career, and the company was going through strategic planning and said, hey, we have this opportunity to acquire a small product, could be a small fish in a great big pond of the ACE inhibitor category, and said, if we can just get half a share point, we're going to be on the map in such a huge way. And it would have been true. The strategic planning process said, hey, we can do this, but the company at the time didn't quantify it the right way and think through the headwinds that they would be fighting against. So when you're going up against big pharma and you're a tiny resource and you don't have the ad spend to compete against them, we weren't realistic at the time about what could actually be accomplished. So of course it was an abysmal failure. Just trying to get half a share point in a massive market is a lot harder than it sounds. And that's an example that stuck with me from early in my career. And so as you think about your marketing opportunity, quantify it, but be realistic. Really challenge yourself and your assumptions. Just because a target, an ICP looks lucrative, looks like it could be a really great place where you could win a lot of clients, think again about, do you have that authentic connection? Are you believable? As Steve and Lisa have said, do you have the resources and expertise that will make you referable in that particular ICP? It's a lot of hard work, but if you take the time to plan, it's going slow to go fast. Ultimately, the more time you take up front to be strategic with your planning process, the faster you will execute and grow to the level you want to.
Lisa?
Well said, Catherine. And I think the one thing I would say is we gave you a lot of different ideas and things to think about. There's no silver bullet of how to, grow to 1 billion or 5 billion. It's really doing some core things really well and all the way to implementation and completion. So I would say as you grow, when you're small, it's normal to have more capacity to take on more clients, to be more of a generalist. But the things we're talking about relative to having a strategic plan or knowing who your ideal client is, if you take the time to do those now, it's going to power you through. So don't feel like you have to do everything we said today, but if one thing really sparked your attention, if it's having a strategic plan or an ideal client persona or, specific marketing strategies, I would say try to do that one thing all the way and not feel like you have to do 25 different things, because there's just so much noise right now and it's so easy to get excited about so many different things. But doing one thing really, really well over the next year all the way, and then focusing on the next most important thing after that, that really will differentiate your firm over time.
All right. Well, fantastic, everybody. I appreciate Lisa. Thank you for being here. Catherine, thank you for being here. Seth, thank you for working the controls here. And thank all of you for participating in our conversation today. And I wish all of you the best of success. Let's stay safe and healthy, and let's get after it here for the rest of this year, and let's get some great momentum into 2021. So we'll wrap it there. Again, thanks all, and take care. Till next time.